So we are now on to our final speaker of the day. And as we are at a conference designed for product people, our next speaker has always struck me as the most, temperament-wise, the most product person I've ever met. And hopefully you'll agree with me after you've had a chance to hear him speak. Speaking of conferences, he spoke at TED in, was it 2002? 2000, year 2000, Y2K, and actually managed to blag his way to getting a spot on that famous stage, which is quite an amazing story, as quite a young person as well. He went on to found the Six to Start studio and was a co-creator of the app Zombies Run, which was one of the earliest big commercial successes. And really just a wonderful product, something that wasn't just about making money, but also giving people a really great and also very healthy experience. His last book was You've Been Played, which documented how gamification was being used by corporations, governments, and schools to manipulate us in ways that we weren't aware of. But he's here today not so much to talk about that, but talk about gamification for good. So with that, could we welcome Adrian Hon to our stage, please?
Thank you. Last talk of the day, so I promise I'll make it fun. It's about games. It's going to be good. And there's no AI, even better. So designing gamification for good. Gamification, I'm sure most people here know what that is. It's using ideas from game design, game mechanics, like points and badges and quests and levels and missions for non-game purposes. So every time I mention this to people, they think Duolingo, right? It's about using ideas from games to get people to do something maybe that they wouldn't normally do, or maybe they want to do, but they can't summon up the kind of motivation to do themselves. So in theory, it's kind of a good thing. As mentioned, I wrote a book which was kind of looking at the darker side of gamification. Spoilers, I think most gamification out there doesn't really work very well, and it's also, a lot of it is kind of designed against the user or the player's own interest. My background is in making this game called Zombies Run, which I'll talk about a bit more. We launched it back in 2012. It was actually launched from a Kickstarter. We raised the money for this on Kickstarter. And it's been running for 13 years now. I sold Six to Start 3 years ago. I left a year ago. Yeah, it's had about 10 million players since it launched. We launched a thing called Marvel Move a couple of years ago, and I've basically been thinking about gamification for a very long time and working with companies like Lululemon, Disney Imagineering, museums to talk about how they can do gamification well. So gamification, it's like in everything now, actually. It really started about like 20 years ago. The term really started appearing around 2010. And now if you've got Peloton, then you will know that, as soon as you open it up, you see this kind of live leaderboard on the right-hand side, and you start ascending that leaderboard, the more, output you make, the more energy you expend. And that is a really powerful motivator for a lot of people. People kind of get obsessed to the point of, maybe exercising too much by competitive mechanics like leaderboards. During the pandemic, I got a Peloton, and then I sold it like 6 months later, like everyone else. And here are some of the kind of achievements you can get from Peloton. You can get things like you've exercised every day in a week, you've exercised for 5 days in a row, you've done X number of kilometers. They're really trying to link game mechanics to help people exercise more. Duolingo, obviously, everything in Duolingo is kind of gamified. Practically everything you do in that app gives you experience points, it levels you up. Everything is part of missions. You get notifications all the time about double XP, happy hour, all that sort of thing. My partner's mum used to disappear during like dinners like every day because it turned out she was getting like double XP from Duolingo, which is kind of really annoying. Actually, that's a really bad use of gamification in my opinion. But you know, it works for Duolingo in the sense that it gets people engaged more with the app. Whether it helps you learn a language, another question. You can use gamification for kind of anything. A lot of you might be familiar with the video games Rock Band or Guitar Hero, where you get like a plastic guitar and you've got like 4, 5, you know, colored buttons. You kind of strum the guitar in time with the music. You play that, you're not really learning to play the guitar. But this is Rocksmith Plus from Ubisoft. And this works with a real 6-string guitar. The idea is that it makes learning the guitar a little bit better. It's still hard to learn how to play the guitar. You know, it's a lot harder to play a real 6-string guitar than it is to play a toy guitar. And one of the things is it's sort of like quite difficult to see your progress. When I was learning the violin as a kid, it's just the worst experience ever because you just sound awful for about 5 years. And I would have actually really liked having a game that showed me getting slightly better at my scales, at playing through my accuracy and through mastery and things like that. And so in these cases, it's kind of not really making it like that much more fun, but it is giving you more feedback about your progress, how good you're getting, and that is quite valuable. Now, a lot of gamification is just really generic, right? You've probably seen in every app you've used, like Microsoft Teams or whatever. On the Apple Watch, if you've got an Apple Watch, you've got pretty much any wearable, it's got gamification built in. And so this is a notification I got recently, and basically it says, hey, whatever you did last month, the game now is to do a little bit more. And that's not good. That's kind of bad design, because it probably isn't that healthy to be doing like 101 exercise minutes every day, right? There's a limit to how much you should be exercising. And the way in which this is designed is a really just like dumb way of basically setting the target higher every month. And that's a situation where they've designed gamification that is basically just trying to maximize the target without thinking about health. Then you've got gamification kind of creeping into pretty much every digital product you can think of. So drivers for Uber now get incentivized to drive more effectively by taking on quests. So if you go and select a quest saying, I will do 50 trips, 70 trips in the next week, then you'll get a bonus. And we're kind of seeing this situation where gamification is being used to basically sort of like disguise or obfuscate people's compensation. And of course you could say, well, this is a good thing. You're like offering people a bonus for hitting their own targets. But in these cases, I kind of think it's more like you're sort of getting punished for losing a task. And that's not great. Gamification is being built into delivery now. So if you work for Amazon, your performance is being monitored here. This is kind of the most fun one that I found, or maybe sort of the weirdest one. At Amazon fulfillment centers, if you work there, you have screens next to your station for some people. And based on your activity, picking items and putting them into a box, or like sorting items, it basically progresses you on through a video game that is linked to that. And you've got a range of video games, I think, that you can choose from. All of this is like confidential. They're not allowed to no one's actually allowed to take photos or videos inside warehouses. And so no one's really sure what's happening. And so in this game that someone took a video of a couple of years ago, it's like a cross between Pokemon and Minecraft. And so the more you work, the more virtual pets you collect. So you can see, I want to go and collect this thing, and yeah, you work harder and you go and collect more virtual pets. Great. And And you can see how, for Amazon, this is like a good thing, because people get attached to their virtual pets, and they don't want to leave their job, and so they like stay on maybe for a few more days or a few more weeks. Sort of dystopian. It's not great. So I kind of want to go and share some principles about gamification for good and effective gamification before going on to talk a bit about how we design Zombies Run and how we put those into practice. So the first one, which sounds like really obvious, is if you can at all achieve this, gamification should actually be fun. And most gamification, the vast majority of gamification doesn't actually achieve this. It's just putting points onto an otherwise boring activity. But I think you can actually do this for a lot of things. So take Duolingo, for example. I don't think that memorizing words and getting points for them is actually fun, no matter how good the animations are. But a friend of mine designed an Italian learning course, and she basically turned it into a murder mystery. So you were like a tourist going to Italy, and someone had gone missing, and you had to go and learn Italian to find out what's going on. Like, that is a way to go and make something a little bit more fun, a little bit more different. Approachability. Just sounds obvious, but you need to make gamification something that's easy for people to get into. I think it's very easy to go and to sort of take ideas from game design, which are maybe a little bit too hard or skill-based, and for those to be too hard to get into. Longevity is a really important thing. There's an idea in psychology called basically the novelty effect. And so the idea is if you go and change something in someone's life or someone's workplace, you go and add in a new game and incentive system, it doesn't really matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether it's good. People pay attention because it's a change in their environment. And it looks like someone is paying attention to them. And so they engage more with it. And so it's very easy to go and design gamification where people are excited for a day or for a week or for 2 weeks or a month, but there's actually not enough depth to the game to sustain people beyond that. And there's not really any point doing gamification if it's not actually going to be enjoyable, it's not going to capture people for months or even years. If you're making a fitness app, which is exciting for 1 week, and then people just tail off, that's not really effective. What you're looking for is long-term behavior change. That's really hard to do, but again, it's something that people should be targeting for. Another thing people should be targeting for is trying to design something that works solo or in groups. A lot of gamification, like Peloton, is based on an idea of competition. Right, so pretty much Peloton, the only thing in it is competition, or Strava. It's about seeing yourself destroy the competition, right? And for some people, that's really motivating. Like, it's really cool to see yourself getting better versus other people. But the problem is that if you're introducing gamification where there's not a big user base, then that's not going to work at all. Also, for a lot of people, they just don't want to. They're not motivated by competition. In fact, they're demotivated by competition. So the most interesting things I've seen are versions of gamification that are really fun on your own, if you play them on your own, if you do it on your own, but get better if you are doing it with other people. Another important thing, which sort of like cuts against like business, is I think ideally gamification is about scaffolding new behaviors. It's about training wheels. And so if you're making a fitness app, if you're teaching people a language or teaching people a new musical instrument, you don't really want a situation where people become completely dependent on your app or on your service to do the thing. Right? That will make you money, but it's not really a very ethical thing to do. And so when we've designed fitness games, what we want people to do is feel good about their bodies, get fit, and after a certain point, it's just fun to go and run or to go and exercise on your own without the app. At that point, you need to go make sure that what you've made is fun enough that people are going to use it anyway, even if they don't need it. And so that's kind of a really crucial thing. Probably the most important thing of all is it still fun? Is your thing still fun if you remove all points, badges, leaderboards, and achievements? Right. The answer is, for most things, it's not, actually. In fact, if you remove all those things, there's nothing left at all. But if I think about a game like Dance Dance Revolution, if you've seen this arcade game, right, you're dancing on these dance mats and times of music. Technically, you get points, right, when you are playing that game. I don't know if anyone ever really remembers how many points they get. It's just more that they enjoy dancing, right? Or if you think about playing five-a-side football, technically, people are keeping score when they're playing football. But actually, or pick up basketball. But actually, no one really remembers. It's not really about that. It's about the joy of movement. And so if you've done something really good is if you take away all these kind of bits of craft, all the kind of like obvious, overt examples of gamification, and it's still fun. There's a lot of risks to gamification when you add it in as well, if you make something really successful. One obvious one is overuse. So I already gave the example of my partner's mum who's just playing Duolingo way too much, and I don't know whether she's really actually learning any language at this point, but just using the app a lot. That is good, again, for the business, but just as a kind of side note, whenever I talk to game designers or product designers about this stuff, I'm like, if you wanted to just make money, you wouldn't be designing products or making video games, you'd just be working in the finance. So you kind of have to remember why you're doing this. It's not just to make money. So Duolingo, that's an example of overuse. Peloton, streaks where people are just exercising more and more and more to go and get to the top of the leaderboard. That's kind of the opposite of what you really want. Until very recently, Apple's Watch didn't have a concept of rest days. So if you were ill, you would break your streak. And people had streaks lasting years. And so people would just exercise while they're ill. It's really, you could say, well, then people shouldn't do that. They should go and break their streaks. But if we, as designers, if we as people think what we're doing, if gamification can be effective in behavior change, then you kind of need to take responsibility as a designer to go and say, well, we need to make sure that the change behavior is actually healthy. Another risk, actually, this happens a lot with new versions of gamification that become really popular, is you end up catering to core players too much. So especially if you've got forums and things. So basically, if you imagine you've designed a new game which is trying to incentivize litter picking in your neighborhood, and you're going to set up a Discord or a forum or a Facebook group, and you've got some people commenting on it saying, I love this game, I wish you could go and add this or that feature. The danger is you end up creating features and changing the application just for your core users, and so it becomes impossible for people to onboard because they just don't care that much. And so this is a thing that really happens quite a lot. If you're making something multiplayer, often what ends up happening is you just get a really toxic community if people care about it a lot. You just look at any video game or any sport. It's just if you leave it alone, then people just become horrible. There are some really good games, video games like Death Stranding, or the Souls-like games, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, which come from Japanese developers. And they have designed in ways where the ways in which players interact in that world can really only be cooperative. It's really smart. It's a really clever way. I won't go into it here, but they've figured out pro-social ways of people helping each other, and that extends through the community. It's kind of really amazing, how if you design in cooperation into the video game, that often feeds into the community, the online community itself. Cheating, if people just end up cheating, and if you're kind of only hurting yourself if you cheat at these gamified applications. A lot of people would ask us actually with Zombies Run, don't people cheat? Don't people just go and cheat and pretend that they've run? And I'm I guess they do, but that would be reading a book and going to the last page first. Like, you can do that, but what would be the point? You know, like, you don't actually have to worry about cheating if your game is good enough that people are playing it for the love of it, rather than trying to beat other people. And of course, a big risk is focusing only on gamification engagement stats rather than end goals, which I just call the Duolingo problem. But the big thing that I really want to encourage all of you to do when you think about gamification, if you do end up doing this, is being specific. And the worst thing I see in gamification is when people just take badges and points and attach it to their existing system, you know, whatever the app is, whatever your website is. So you just go and say, I'll just give you 5 points for clicking on this button, and I give you 10 points if you come back, you know, every day for a week, and I give you 100 points if you go and refer a friend. That's what everyone does, right? It's not very specific because you could just do exactly the same thing for any activity. In reality, every activity is completely different. It's completely different. Even running is actually completely different. It's very specific. So we weren't the first people to go and gamify running. There's lots of people who did gamification of running or exercise before us. You've got something like Strava. Strava, run tracking app, fitness tracking app. The way it worked was by measuring people's speed along certain like geographical segments. And so you could become the local legend if you could run this street the fastest. That's really good, actually, if you are competitive. And if you're not the fastest, then sucks to be you. You will never be the local legend. So that's not great. It's good if you're really competitive. Similar for Peloton, right? This is a thing for people who are competitive, but it's not really segmented. It doesn't really sort of like figure out how good you are, except against everyone else. This is probably the primary example of generic gamification from like my Fitbit from a long time ago, I think from all my Y things. It's just like, you got this badge for walking 200 kilometers. You could imagine that for like anything, for literally any kind of achievement. It's not really that incentivizing. It gets a little bit more interesting with these examples. So this was from Nike back in 2010. And they split London up into 4 different teams. And based on how much people ran in their team, then the team would win. So it's a little bit more interesting, but not really, because you could just kind of run anywhere, and you'll just make the number get bigger. This one was a bit more interesting as well. This was a game called Turfly, and it was location-based. And so the idea was you would run around the real world, and by running through different squares, you would go and collect those squares, and you would own them, right? So you're trying to go and defend your turf. It's really satisfying to see yourself run through an area and capture territory. It's kind of really cool, actually. The issue is, if you had someone who lived nearby you who just ran 5% more than you every day, they will destroy you every single time. Right? That's not actually a good game. Right? That's kind of not really how it works. The other issue with Turfly, which I'll sort of get into a bit more, is that like if you're like me, or if you're like most runners do not actually look at a map of the world and like, I'm just going to go and fill up every single square. Some people are like that, free spirits, but actually most people just go and run the same route every week, right? Because it's convenient. They're running to and from work, or they're running around the park, or they're running along the river. When I basically have got like 3 different running routes. I don't have like 10, I've just got 3. And so this is great for people who feel like incentivized to go and explore the world, but actually, for most people who do running regularly, they want to do the same route, because they don't want to think about it or look at their phone too much. And the same applies for this game called Cash and Seek, which is kind of a really cool idea. The idea is that you would run a route, and then you could deposit treasure, and the other people could go and collect it. And I played this, and the problem was that people would just put treasure in all sorts of dodgy places. And I'm like, I just don't want to run there. Like, I don't feel like running there. I don't like that place. It's not near where I live. I just don't want to do that. This is a really cool idea. This is a fun game. It used to be called Scramble. But then Hasbro got in touch with them, and they renamed it to Seek and Spell. And so it's a multiplayer game. There's 4 players, and you can see how it works. They've superimposed tiles on the map, and you go and connect the tile by running over it, and then when you've got the tiles, you go and spell out a word. Pretty cool. If you played this in school, or if you had like 3 housemates who loved to run, you could like play this every week, right? But as like actual exercise, and to be fair, I don't think this was designed as exercise, but as actual like regular exercise, expecting people to find a group of 4 friends, 3 friends, who will run with you at the same time every day or every week, it's just like too much. That you kind of need something that can work solo. So when we designed Zombies Run, we basically sort of started from the perspective of we kind of want to go and meet people where they are. We want to be really specific about how people actually run. And so the first thing that we noticed is that, firstly, people just like running their own routes. We don't really want to get people to go and run where they don't want to run. Part of the reason is that like if you're running, you don't want to be taking your phone out every 5 minutes to look at a map. It's just not really practical. The second thing we noticed is, and this was like in 2011, everyone already ran with their headphones in. Like everyone was listening to podcasts back then already, people listening to audiobooks, people listening to music. So it wouldn't be asking anything of people to go and, require headphones, require audio. So we have these kind of 2 like starting points. We can use audio, and we're not going to tell people to do anything different, really, other than going around their usual route. So how can we make a game out of that? And the idea was to put people in an audio post-apocalypse, where you're listening to basically like an audiobook, like an audio drama. And in order to survive, you have to run to collect supplies, to find survivors, to find a cure. And as you run, the audio drama plays kind of automatically. And then in between chapters, sometimes you get chased by zombies, and you need to go and speed up by 10 or 20% to evade them. And if you get caught, then you don't die, because it's just a game, but you do lose some of your supplies. And the crucial thing is we don't tell people to kind of turn left or turn right, because that's sort of unsafe, but also it's because people are going along their current route. It sort of makes sense in the game. And so when we announced this on Kickstarter, people just like got it. I mean, people just saw the name Zombies Run, and they kind of understood, oh, right, I've just run away from zombies. But the way we built it together, I mentioned longevity before, is by having an unfolding story, like a soap opera, like The Walking Dead. We've had people who've been subscribed to us for like 12 years, basically. They just keep on playing. If it was just hearing zombies growl behind you and you running faster, people would have done that for like 1 month, right, if that. It would have been fun, but a distraction. We've had people who have been playing for years, and we've been able to help them get through really tough times, or to lose weight, or to get fit, or because of that. And before you think I'm just like saying, well, you kind of have to do it like the way we've done it, I'd also go and highlight a virtual reality game called Beat Saber. And so this game, again, wasn't really sort of designed for fitness. It's just a game where you end up getting fit as a result of playing it. The way in which you play this game is you've got these 2 sort of controllers, motion controllers, like lightsabers, and you're sort of like cutting these blocks that are coming at you in certain directions along to the music. And sometimes they're like walls that come, and you have to go and step left or step right or jump or crouch down. And if you do this for like an hour, half an hour, you're getting sweaty. You're exerting yourself, and you just kind of notice by the end, hey, like I've actually gotten fit. And you're not like really asking people to kind of do much more than they would otherwise. You're not like getting people to kind of buy a lot of extra things. They've just got all the stuff that they need. And so I'll just go and play a little bit of this. Not too much because you might go and get motion sick. But yeah, it just looks fun. You know, you don't feel like you're having to exercise. You're just doing something where, you know, you are having to, you know, crouch down or you know, like move your arms a lot in order to go and play. And so when we're thinking about gamification, what we want to do is avoid the just make number get bigger and try and make something where people say this about what you've made, which is difficult, but if you can do that, then that's really the best solution. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. I wanted to ask, I mean, where did the idea come from in the first place? I mean, because you talked a little bit about, but like, where did it start? Before there was a Kickstarter, before there was like...
Yeah, well, you know, Sixer Start was a digital agency originally.
Okay.
And we were doing a lot of work for hire, making games and, you know, apps and websites for people like the BBC and Disney and so on. And we really, like a lot of digital agencies, we just wanted to kind of make our own thing, make a product. And I was sitting down having lunch with our co-creator, Naomi Alderman, who's a novelist.
Sorry, how did that relate? How do you know any of...
So I know her because I've been making games with her for like 20 years.
Oh, right.
And so we were just like, oh, we should make a new game together.
Yeah.
And she told me that she just joined a running club, an online running club. And in the running club, they said, why do you want to run? And one person said they want to lose weight. Another person said they want to get fit. And a third woman said, I want to go and survive the zombie apocalypse. And I remember thinking, oh, that's like funny, but I'm kind of sick of zombies, actually. Like, zombies are overdone. And this was like 2011. Obviously, we still have zombies now. They will never die. And then we kind of thought, actually, zombies are like it's a really good like theme, because you can't like kill all the zombies, right? That's not a solution in zombie movies. There's always more zombies coming. Most zombies, outside of the 28 days later ones, they don't move very fast. And we wanted to make a game that anyone could play. So we said, actually, as long as you can walk, you can actually outrun most of these zombies. And from a kind of gameplay story engine point of view, we thought, as you've seen with like a TV show like The Walking Dead, that TV show just goes on forever. Like, it never stops. There's always more stuff you can tell, more kind of drama. And we thought, actually, like, I hate zombies, but it's a perfect premise for a game that we want people to keep playing.
Wow, okay. And so for the person that's been playing for 12 years, like, how do you guys keep that narrative fresh enough that he or she keeps playing?
Well, so I'm no longer at Sixer Start, but like I mean, it's difficult because like it's like, well, how do you go and tell any story that really lasts for 11 or 12 years? You need a really good storyteller.
Yeah.
You know, story is like kind of like one half of what was at the core of Zombies Run for a long time, and I think I've seen actually when Zombies Run launched, I was kind of terrified, actually, that like Nike or Reebok would just go and join in and like just steal our idea. And some companies did, and they just got just the shittiest like writers like you could imagine. It's just really bad writing, because the people who ran the companies could not distinguish between good writing and bad writing. Yeah. If you get a good writer, you can tell a story for like 20 years. It's not a problem. We did add in new features. So we added a thing called virtual races, which is a pretty popular thing now, actually, where you go and say, you run together for like, you know, on this day for like, and you have like 5,000 people who are running 5 kilometers, and they're all hearing the same story. So it kind of feels like a collective thing, but you're separated. Yeah. And so we sort of created more community events for that to happen.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. One of the things that happened to me during the pandemic is I got sucked into a game called State of Survival.
Yeah.
You know it, right? Yeah. And like, it was one of these things that, you know, looking for something to do in the pandemic, and I don't even know how I got into it. I played it for about a year or so, but one of the things that shocked me was, like how truly global this game is.
Yeah.
And how much goddamn money
Yeah.
people, and that there seem to be not like a lot of whales who are spending tens of thousands of pounds a year to say, and they obviously just make up new bullshit for people that don't. And also the other thing is that people are just constantly complaining about how shit this game is, and yet they're still playing it day after day after day after day after. And I'm just wondering if this is almost, it's kind of like a, Pottersville in It's a Wonderful Life, where it's just a really shit thing, and yet people, I'm just wondering, is that gamification for evil?
I mean, that's a complicated question. I think what has happened with a lot of online games is it's sort of replaced, like, people, I mean, it's become people's, like, social third place, right? And so where they might have, I mean this seriously, where they might have, like, gone to church or they've gone to, like, the local bowling alley or whatever, now they go home and they play the game. Right. And I'm not saying that's, like, a terrible thing. Like, it's more just like that's what's happening. Yeah. And so you could say, well, if you hate it so much, why didn't you go and leave? Yeah. But their friends are there, and they've spent hundreds of hours or thousands of hours building up, like, skills where they're really good at this game. And if they go and leave and play Call of Duty or FIFA or whatever, it's like they're starting from scratch with, like, no friends and no skills. Yeah. So they're kind of locked in. That's actually, it's kind of a problem, actually. Like, and that is, like, almost an example of, like, how powerful gamification can be. Like, it shows, like, you can really capture people. Yeah.
Listen, we've got a couple questions from the audience. I have a feeling this may be from a Monzo representative. How would you advise a bank using gamification in their apps, mainly for education?
Mainly for education. I've got Monzo, so if you want to go and, like, give me some extra perks, then please do. We used to make educational games for Channel 4 and for the BBC. We made an award-winning one for, like, about online safety. And the best educational games I've seen are kind of more like simulations, actually. So something like Factorio or Kerbal Space Program or things like that, or Minecraft even, where what you are doing feels like an actual living system rather than kind of like too much of a toy. And that lets people kind of really understand it. And so, like, if you play, like, Kerbal Space Program, it's quite complicated, but by the end, you, like, know a lot about orbital physics. If you play Factorio, I mean, I think that the CEO of Shopify said if you want a job at Shopify, just show him, like, how good you are at Factorio, and then you can get in, because it's all about automation and process management. So, like, for finance, you would probably go and make a game, like, and not too simple a game either, like, about finance. And people would see that. The problem is that most people wouldn't actually play it, because people already think they're good at what they do. I don't know if we need to go and.
Okay, all right. We're being flagged down here. Okay, well, I'm gonna push my luck and just. Because there's been a relatively recent like a sort of dawning of understanding about how big online gambling has become. Yeah. And how toxic it is for people all around the world. Again, is that something where they really depend heavily on gamification for the addiction process, right? Yeah. Okay.
I mean, probably some of you have heard of this book called Addicted by Design by Nasha Dowshall. It's about the design of slot machines, in Las Vegas, and basically, like, most, gambling is around, is around sort of variable ratio reinforcement, where you're sort of having a payout come unpredictably. Yeah. And so, whether that's opening up a loot box in Fortnite or, Rocket, League, or whether you're playing, a slot machine, people just get really addicted to the thrill of, like, putting it, and it's like, maybe this time I'll get it. Oh, I was really close. I think it's awful, honestly. Like, it's terrible, and there are some countries that are trying to regulate loot boxes and trying to regulate gambling mechanics, but other countries are going the opposite direction. In America, they've basically legalized online gambling, and they've sort of legalized sports gambling. It's a really lazy form of game design as well. Honestly, like, there are better games we can make than that.
Adrian. Thanks a million.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Right, folks, can we give a round of applause for all of our speakers from today, please? And a huge round of applause as well for our sponsor, Komodo.